We're going to continue practicing with average rates of change. We have a bookstore example where there's a new Harry Potter book that came out, and the date is released as time equals 0. So the function b of t, that's a typo, so please fix that while we're here. B of t equals to 20 times log base 2 t plus 2. Okay, and that's what best models the data. Let's get our inputs and outputs straight. So they put the days on the x-axis, which makes sense because time is normally put on the x-axis. So these are our input variables. And the books are on the y-axis, so those are our output variables. And now we can begin to answer the questions. Calculate the average rate of change on the interval 0 to 6. First, we need to remember the formula for average rate of change. Remember, it's a change in output divided by a change in input. And looking at here, the output are the books and the input of the days. Let me put a note here so I remember that I put the books on top and the days on bottom. And that will kind of keep my data straight. Okay, so we're doing it on intervals 0 to 6. So we're doing it in the first 7 days here. And on day 6, I sell 60 books, right? So I'm going to put that here. On day 6, I sold 60 books. And on day 0, which is the first day, I sold 20 books. And now I can evaluate the rate of change. 60 minus 20 is 40 books within 6 days. I plug that into Desmos, and it looks like I have 6.6 repeating. For the sake of the AP Pre-Cal exam, we always do 3 decimal places. 6.667 books per day. So that's how many books I'm selling on average per day. Okay. Now it wants me to find the rate of change on the interval 16. So once again, it's the same formula. Let me set myself up for success. I know that I'm going to have books on top, make a note, and I'm going to have days on bottom, and I'm subtracting 2 numbers to get an answer. So, all right, days 6 through 14, so 6 to 14, so to know how many difference of days that is, I'm going to do 14 minus 6, and the books are 80 minus 60. And I'm going to plug that in. Well, actually, I can do this real quickly. So that's 20 books in 8 days. When I calculate that, 20 over 8, or if I just calculate the whole thing, is giving me 2.5. All right, so in summary, for the first part of the book sell, right, we were selling on average 6.667 books per day. And then toward the end of the book sell, I was only selling 2.5 books per day. So the interest in the book died down with time. You know, that makes sense. All the fans for Harry Potter are going to come in toward the beginning, buy the book, and then, you know, but the hype dies down over time. So what is the meaning of average rate of change? Well, as you can see, it was always books on top, and it was days on bottom. So it's basically how many books you're selling per day on average. Now we're not saying that every day they actually sold this many books. We're saying on average, when you sum it all up and divide by the number of days, that's about how many books they were selling per day. All right, now we're going to introduce to you a new type of question that you've never encountered before. What is the average rate of change at 9 days? Okay. Now, you are used to calculating average rates of changes on an interval where they give you 2 input values to use. And those 2 input values told us how to calculate it. But now they're asking us, find the average rate of change at 9 days. Well, let's look at that on the graph and where that's at. So the 9 days is this data point right there. So don't make the mistake of thinking that you're going to plug in this number twice. Let me show you what happens when you do that. First of all, let's plug in the function into Desmos. Now remember that if you just leave the window pane the same way every time, you're not going to get a good idea of the function. Make sure you change your window pane by clicking on this And we only need to see the first 16 days of the book sell, and they're selling anywhere from 0 books to like about 100 books, right? And that gives us a clearer picture of the entire sell. To see how many books were sold on the 9th day, I can click on this and ask for a table. And obviously I don't need anything below 0 days. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I need to know the 9th day. 69.188 books. So when it's asking me for the average rate of change on day 9, how do I calculate that? Well, don't make the mistake of thinking that you just plug in the number twice to get an answer. Okay, watch what happens when you do that. Undefined, right? So what do they mean? Well, this logarithmic function is a curve. But if I zoom in on this spot, even though it's truly a curve here, I can interpret this part of it as like a little mini line. It's like I'm zooming in on it. And if I want to find the average rate of change at day 9, what I do is I calculate the average rate of change of this little segment here using day 8 and day 10. So at 9 days, I'm just going to interpret that as an interval between 8 and 10 because that interval gives me a pretty good line, right? So I'm going to have 10 days minus 8 days on the bottom. And I need to figure out how many books were sold on day 10. And I need to figure out how many books were sold on day 8. And, oh, Desmos can do that for me. Since I've defined the function b in my Desmos up here, I can literally type b of 10 minus b of 8. Or I can put them in the table here and find the values. Either way, I'm selling 2.630 books per day on average on day 9. And there's our answer right there. All right, question 5 means to say, what is the average rate of change at 14 days? Okay, so we're going to go up here, and obviously we're talking about this point. I see it is a curve. Don't get confused. This is not like connect the dots at IHOP and these are straight lines, right? But to calculate the average rate of change at 14 days, I'm just going to take the 2 neighboring points and calculate the slope of that little mini line right there. So basically, I need to find how many books were sold on the 15th day, subtracted by the books sold on the 13th day, and divide by the difference in those days. So go back here to Desmos, and I can calculate it using this method or this method. I can make the table so I can see what days they are. In summary, it's about 1.806 books per day. 1.806 books per day. So as you can see here, a lot of hype. They're selling about 7 books per day and then 2.5 books per day. And then toward the end, they're only selling barely 1.8 books a day. So based on the rate of change calculated in question 5, so since this is the trend toward the end of the line, right, it's going to ask me to predict the future. It's going to ask me to predict how many books will have been sold by day 30. Well, looking at the 16th day, I'm selling 83 books, right? So I know I'm going to have at least 83 books sold. And if people stop buying at this point, it'll just be 83 for the rest of time. But my latest rate of change that I calculated, the one it wants me to use, saying is that I'm selling about 1.8 books per day. And we're just going to assume that trajectory continues on. We're basically assuming that this line just goes forward as a straight line. And so let's think about that. So I'm selling 1.806 books per day. And it wants me to figure out on day 30. Well, day 30 is 14 days later from this data point right here. So if I have 14 days left, I multiply those two numbers, and that will tell me how many books on average I will have sold. The days cancel out, and let's plug this formula in. Plugging the values in, it gives me 108.284. Now, the question is how many total books? You cannot sell a fraction of a book. So you either have to round down or up. And I know you're thinking, well, Mr. Cherry Holmes, you've been teaching us to round to 3 decimal places every time. But since we're talking about books and books can't be sold in decimals, the only logical way to approach this is to say about 108 books total. Now that's assuming this continues as a straight line, but we know it doesn't, and I'm going to prove it to you using Desmos here. So we need to figure out on day 30, here it says 100, right? And I'm going to plot that point over here. So we estimated that on the 30th day, we're going to sell 108 books. But the curve shows that the projection is that we're only going to sell 100 books. And the reason why that happened is that if I assume a straight line from these last two data points, it's obviously going to be higher estimate than what the logarithm is giving me. So that kind of answers our next question right here. It says, is our estimate an overestimate or an underestimate? So the answer is it's an overestimate. And here's why. The curve is concave down. Right? That's the problem. And the rate of change will decrease. We assumed the rate of change to be constant. So that's how we got it wrong. So therefore we have an overestimate.